Good evening. Welcome to the first of several budget meetings for fiscal year 2021-2022 for the City of College Park. I am Mayor Bianca Motley Broom. We're having some technical difficulties this evening, so you will not be able to see me, but you should be able to hear me. And all council members are present at this time. We have everyone here, so we are ready to go at 6:37 p.m. Our interim city manager, Mercedes Miller, will be doing most of the heavy lifting this evening, and I believe I will hand it over to her at this time.
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council, staff, and the citizens of the great city of College Park. It gives me great pleasure to present our 21-22 recommended budget, which focuses on strengthening our tomorrow, retaining our employees, and moving the city forward in unprecedented times. We will have a brief PowerPoint overview, and then we will turn the meeting back over to the mayor. Thank you all very much. If you have any questions, please let us know. Okay, Ms. Althea.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and all that are attending today's budget workshop. As the interim city manager mentioned, the PowerPoint is just a brief overview of what is included in the city's recommended 2021-2022 budget. An overview of the budget, fiscal year 2021-22 citywide recommended budget is $134,157,965. The general fund recommended budget is $33,162,507. The fiscal year 2022 recommended budget also includes a $7.2 million in capital improvements and equipment and vehicle replacement citywide. General fund makes up for about 1.2 million of the total. There's a transfer from car rental tax funds to finance the purchase of police vehicle replacements and equipment. Also included is the phase 2 of the fire personnel salary compression pay study.
Althea, excuse me. I don't see any thing being shared on the screen. Is there a PowerPoint that's supposed to be being shared?
Yes. No one can see the PowerPoint?
I can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, I see the overview, yes.
That's interesting. Why can't I see it?
It's probably hidden.
Let's see here.
Hold on a minute. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on, the budget also includes the deferral of $8.7 million in debt service obligations, and this is pending a refinance, and that will be the deferral of principal payments only. And the recommended budget was prepared using the current operated millage rate of 12.619. The citywide revenue sources summary schedule provides a 3-year history of revenue by sources and by fund. As illustrated to the right on the pie chart, charges for services accounts for almost half of the city's revenues. This is primarily due to the fees charged for providing utility service to our city residents and commercial customers. The next slide shows the citywide expenses by fund and by category. When compared to fiscal year 2021, the citywide recommended expenses shows a slight increase of about 0.25%. The slight increase is attributed to a number of variables that both increased and reduced the overall budget in some areas. For instance, we're funding the restoration of positions that were previously unfunded in the prior fiscal year, which is the current fiscal year we're in, 2021. And most notably, the reduction of debt service payments of the $8.7 million. And there's a increase of capital equipment in the general fund. However, there's a reduction in the power and FAA fund budget. So overall, that's what basically attributed to the overall slight increase of the budget when compared to the current fiscal year. Excuse me. This is not cooperating. All right. Is everyone on the general fund expenditures by function slide?
Yes.
We are.
Okay.
Yes, Althea, one more question.
Yes, sir.
This is not the information that we have in our packet.
Yes, it is. Well, not the PowerPoint.
The
but
PowerPoint
but the
not,
schedules
correct?
are the same, correct?
Okay, thank you.
But the schedules that are on the PowerPoint are the same.
Right, but I have to pull my notes off my packet, so.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
Let me ask a quick question. Do all the numbers take into account the deferral of the debt?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it does. I'll just show you here. If you look at the debt service line item across, you see 2021 amended, we were at 17.3. Now it's down to 8.8. So that does take into consideration the deferral. Okay, moving on to the general fund expenditures by function, which represents the makeup of the general fund expenses. What are your tax dollars being spent and where is it being spent? Of the general fund's recommended budget expenditures, public safety accounts for 59% of the overall cost. General government makes up 20.5%. Your general government departments includes your administrative departments such as, excuse me, the city council's budget, city manager's department, finance, purchasing, HR, and IT. Recreation accounts for 9.2% of the overall budget. Public works, which consists of streets, parks, and building and grounds departments, accounts for 6.3%. Economic development accounts for 1.3%. And that does include the Main Street department budget. And transfers out to other funds such as E911 and golf course accounts for 2.3% of the overall general fund expenditures by function budget. Now, we just went over the general funds by function budget. Now we're going over the general fund expenses by department. This schedule shows the history of the general fund expenses for the past few years by department and category. The recommended budget is 12.6% more compared to fiscal year 2021 revised total budget. And this increase is primarily due to the restoration of positions previously frozen, an increase in capital outlay, and various operating expenses that had a slight increase, had an increase throughout the general fund departments. And that's primarily because we were at, in fiscal year 2021 budget, we made a lot of cuts to operating expenses, and now we're bringing back up to the level of providing services that the city has been doing for years. And by category, to the right, the pie chart shows the expenditure summary by category, and you can see that personnel costs accounts for close to a third of the recommended budget. So this is where your tax dollars are going. Now, our general fund revenues by sources, this basically breaks out what your general fund revenues type sources. Ad valorem, property tax revenue represents 39.7% of the general fund revenues. Other taxes, which consist of your franchise fees, mixed drink tax, and local option sales tax, accounts for 24.5%. Licenses and permits accounts for 11.3%. Your intergovernmental revenues, which consists of the American Rescue Plan Act, accounts for 4.1%. Other incomes, and this includes primarily your miscellaneous revenue and interest revenue, accounts for 2%. Fines and forfeitures make up 1.9%. charges for services, 1.1, and 15.4% of the general fund revenue is supplemented by funds transferred in from other city funds. So that is the makeup of your general fund revenues.
Now, Pam, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What I gave you a heads up on this one. I think I don't have it on this slide, obviously, because I don't have this slide. But I think it was, my question was, what percentage of the ad valorem taxes are coming from homes, from resident taxes?
You asked me that a while ago. I think we came up with about 13 to 15%.
That's what we had before. Is that still?
Yeah.
Is that still about right?
Yes, sir.
So people who are paying property taxes or feeling they're paying a lot of property taxes, high property taxes, they're only contributing 15% or so.
To the general fund.
To the general fund. Yes, sir. That's my point.
To the overall fund, it's a lot less to the overall budget.
Ms. Floyd Bradley, are you okay with a question on the American Rescue Plan? Or would you like to hold off on that?
I can see that. I'll see if I can answer that. Go ahead.
Okay. So we've got $1.365 million in the general fund revenues for that. That's not the entire amount that we're expecting this fiscal year, correct?
No, ma'am. We're estimating about from what we've received, we should receive about $4.7 million. 2.3 will come within the next 60 days. And I think the remaining balance has to be paid out within 12 months. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Bradley, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If it's not the right time to ask it, that's fine. I can ask another time. But when you was showing the public safety, we showing the budget, the costs, our city costs by departments, and you had public safety as the highest amount.
Yes, sir.
Is that cost comparable to similar cities with the amount of residents, 13,000? Is that comparable, you think, to those other cities?
Yes. I think that's all across the nation. Your public safety takes up about 50 to 60% of your budget. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Our next slide is the current property tax rate slide. Here, it just represents the city's current property tax rates. The recommended budget was prepared using the current millage rates shown on the table. And also listed is the 2020 tax digest values, which funded fiscal year 2021 budget.
Ms. Floyd Bradley, let me ask you a question on the tax digest values.
Sorry.
I know this is something that Mr. Wall has discussed, and I don't know if we are seeing folks appeal those tax digest values at this point, or how the folks that work with you are thinking of that as we move forward. Are we anticipating a high number of appeals at this point due to the pandemic?
I do have Philip Latona on the line. Philip, can you help answer the question? I do know from the time that the budget we adopted the budget, the tax digest values were decreased. However, to answer your question, I would have to defer to Philip. Philip? I don't know if it's...
Yeah, Philip is on. Philip, your mic is unmuted. Can you say hello?
I can get that question answered. I can get that question answered.
I don't want to hold things up. We'll get back to it.
All right. The The 10-year history slide, which is the current slide up, illustrates the taxable property values and adopted millage rate over the past 10 years. Fiscal year 2013 was the last time the millage rate was increased from 11.56 to 12.619. The city has been able to maintain the current millage rate for the past 9 years. And going on 10 with the fiscal year 2022 budget. In the coming months, our financial advisor, Ed Wall, will come before the council to present a debt restructuring plan, which will allow the city to defer $8.7 million in principal payments until fiscal year 2024-2025. The deferral will give the city some relief, as some funds and revenue sources are not projected to perform at their pre-COVID level, and they would therefore would normally otherwise rely on the general fund reserve. So that does give the city some relief if we are able to push that back. If we're not, we have to come back to the table to figure out how we're going to fund the $8.7 million. And also listed is basically the debt service obligations that are scheduled for refinancing. And the Georgia International Convention Center debt obligations, it is about $5.1 million in change. So we really need to defer the debt in order to be able to not rely on the general fund reserves. The recommended budget also includes the request for new positions, and listed are the department requests. Overall total cost for the additional positions, $251,383. And this is included in your overall budget total.
Now, Althea, on the police department, for example, that's an additional position.
Yes, sir.
But does the budget assume that the many unfilled positions that we have in the police department will be filled? And if so, by what date? Or is there a scheduled spread over time that we're taking account of in order to hold to the budget numbers?
There is a spread, and that spread includes some positions are not funded. There's a freeze on several positions, and there are positions also where we show they're only budgeted for 6 months out the year, and then there are vacant positions that are 100% budgeted. So we did do a spread.
So the addition of a position is almost noise level compared to the number of positions that we're already short and we're not even filling, or not filling from day one of the fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay, that's important.
Correct.
And when do we, based on that spread, when do we anticipate that the budget will come to full strength with all approved positions filled?
At least by, I'll let the city manager answer that, but my estimation is fiscal year 2023.
So we're going in.
We don't expect it to happen.
You're telling me we're going into a budget right now with a table of organization that has a lot of empty spaces in it, and we will end the budget year with those spaces still empty.
Correct. That is accurate.
Correct.
Wow. I knew we were down people, but I didn't know that we were making that assumption in the budget. It's no wonder we were able to achieve the budget that we've been able to achieve.
I have a follow-up question to Councilman Ambrose's comment. Why is an erosion control compliance officer and a code enforcement officer, which is a little over $100,000, necessary rather than filling those positions or even adding positions to public works, where I know for a fact they're short. In other words, why are those
the
two
Public Works
positions
Department does
important?
have several.
Excuse me?
Well, the erosion control compliance officer is important to us because it will offset the more than $100,000 that we're spending on engineers, and they will actually be going after funds that are due to the city. So all we're doing is swapping our funds from an engineer over to our own officer to go out and do that. And then for the police department, that code enforcement officer, with the increase in residents and homes that we have coming into the area, we do need to increase that code enforcement department.
Well, I disagree respectfully, and that's it.
I think Councilman Gay, one thing we have to consider is the fact that we can get code enforcement officers. I think one of the reasons, and it's been taken advantage of in the budget, that we have a number of police positions that are not filled. But that isn't because we don't want to fill them. That's because we haven't been able to acquire them. Whereas I suspect it's easier, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, that it may be easier to get a code enforcement officer. I agree with you. I'd like to have a policeman on the street, but I think it's a question of what we can get too.
It's certainly, I'm sorry, to add to that, to add to Councilman Clay's comment, I think it's a nationwide situation. Certainly one that's acute in Metro Atlanta in terms of recruiting and retaining officers. I was on a call last week with some folks from Marietta who are looking at the same thing. We know our neighbors in the region are also looking for officers. I think Atlanta's down by about 400 officers. So everyone is looking to hire police officers in a time where it is probably one of the more difficult positions to fill. But certainly it's something that we are focused on and trying to make sure that we're putting extra effort there.
Also, Councilman Gay, I think you were asking about Public Works, and there were several of those positions that were frozen. Last year when we had to cut the budget, a lot of those positions have been released, and they have a lot of positions posted. So there are extra positions in Public Works. We just have to fill those positions.
All right, thank you.
Do we know if Public Works will be down when we finish filling all the positions you said release them? Will that put them up to full staff, or will they still be short versus what, when we froze them?
They will still have some positions that are frozen.
Okay. I don't know about anybody else on council, but I would like to see a graphic that would show by organization the buildup of staff positions